Last year, we tried for a baby. I'm completely infertile without surgery, then she got pregnant 5 months later. It's been 3 years since I tied the knot with my wife, Lisa, and 6 years since we first got together. Looking back on those years, it's like a beautiful, winding journey filled with countless memories that I cherish deeply. In all that time, she's truly been nothing short of a wonder in my life. You know that feeling when you meet someone and it's like you've known them forever? That's how it was with Lisa. Our love languages meshed so perfectly, it was as if they were two pieces of a flawless jigsaw puzzle. I've always been one for acts of service and quality time. There were mornings when I'd wake up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee, and there she'd be, standing in the kitchen with a warm smile, a steaming cup already prepared just for me. And on those lazy Sundays, without fail, she'd nudge me gently and say, "Hey, let's go take a long walk in the park. The fresh air will do us good." And we'd set off, hand in hand, strolling along the paths, watching the ducks on the pond and chatting about anything and everything. We're both the active types too, always on the lookout for our next adventure. Signing up for soccer leagues was a regular thing for us. I can still vividly remember those evenings on the field, the grass beneath our feet, the sound of our laughter and shouts as we chased the ball. After the game, we'd be sweaty and exhausted but still grinning from ear to ear. Hikes were another favorite. We'd pack a small backpack with some snacks and water and head out into the mountains. Standing at the summit, looking out at the sprawling landscape below, feeling the wind in our hair, it was like we were on top of the world. And hitting the gym together was our way of staying fit and having fun. We'd spot each other on the weights, share a high five after a tough set, and motivate one another to keep going. That shared energy, that passion for life and for each other, has been the unbreakable bond that's held our relationship rock solid for so long. The past few years have been a real roller coaster ride career-wise too. Lisa's been absolutely killing it in the marketing world. She'd come home some days, her eyes sparkling with excitement, and launch into a detailed account of the big campaign she was working on. I'd sit there, captivated, as she described the creative strategies, the meetings with clients, and the late nights spent perfecting every detail. And me? I've been doing my own thing as an IT consultant, and I have to say, I love the freedom that comes with setting my own hours. It gives me this unique flexibility that allows me to be there for her whenever she needs me. There were weekday afternoons when I'd get a call from her, a bit stressed about something at work, and I'd be able to drop everything, head to the grocery store, and pick up her favorite comfort foods to cheer her up. Or on those really tough days, I'd spend the afternoon in the kitchen, whipping up a delicious home-cooked meal, and have it ready and waiting for her when she walked through the door. The look of relief and gratitude on her face was always worth every minute of effort. Last year, we took a huge step in our relationship and decided it was time to start a family. Oh, the conversations we had leading up to that decision. We'd sit on the couch, a notepad and pen in hand, and start mapping out our future. Lisa would be all animated, saying she wanted to keep her job full-time, at least for the initial period. She loved her work, and I understood that completely. I, on the other hand, was more than willing to scale back to part-time. I couldn't wait to be more hands-on with the baby, to change diapers, give baths, and watch our little one grow and learn. We were both admittedly a bit nervous. The thought of bringing a new life into the world is, without a doubt, scary as hell. But it was also this indescribable thrill, this anticipation of creating something so precious and unique together. We'd lie in bed at night, the room bathed in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, and talk for hours about baby names. We'd go through lists, debating the merits of each one. Would we go for something classic or more modern? And then we'd shift gears and start imagining what our little one would look like. Would they have Lisa's beautiful eyes or my nose? And of course, we couldn't resist planning how we'd decorate the nursery. We'd scroll through Pinterest, getting inspiration, and arguing over whether we wanted a jungle theme or a more minimalist Scandinavian style. Then last December, it felt like the ground beneath my feet gave way. I got diagnosed with azoospermia. I remember sitting in that doctor's office, the sterile white walls seeming to close in on me as he explained the condition. A blockage in the pipes, he said, which meant that when I ejaculated, there was simply no sperm. It was like a sledgehammer to the chest, a sucker punch to the gut. But as he continued speaking, I clung onto a glimmer of hope. It was curable with surgery. We quickly set it up for this July, and from that moment on, I held on to that hope like it was my last lifeline. It was all I had to keep me going during those difficult months. In the meantime, our relationship didn't miss a beat. We were still as deeply in love as ever, and our sex life was still going strong. Lisa's always had a high sex drive, and I'm not one to shy away either, so we were still enjoying each other's company in that very intimate way. But in the back of my mind, I knew, without a doubt, there was no way I could get her pregnant. This week, everything changed. Lisa missed her period. At first, when she mentioned it casually over breakfast, I just shrugged it off. There was no way, right? With my condition, it was impossible. But then, later that day, she took not one, not two, but 3 pregnancy tests. I watched her from the doorway as she waited, her eyes fixed on those little sticks. And when each one came back positive, I was rooted to the spot, stunned. I stood there in the bathroom, my eyes wide, staring at those little sticks like they were some kind of alien artifacts that had just landed in our lives. My mind started racing a million miles an hour. How could this be? Lisa had never given me any reason to doubt her. She was the most loyal, trustworthy person I knew. We'd been through so much together, the highs and the lows, and cheating was just something that had never even entered my mind. But the doctors were so clear, this shouldn't be happening. As the day went on, I couldn't help but start thinking back on little things, like how her job often had her out late, taking clients to dinner. It was a normal part of her line of work, and I'd never thought twice about it before. But now, in this new light, it seemed a bit suspicious. There was one night in particular. She came home later than usual, and as she walked through the door, I caught a whiff of a scent that was completely different from her usual 2 perfumes. It threw me off, and I remember feeling a strange pang in my stomach. And then there was that text I'd seen on her lock screen a while back. Just a winky face. At the time, I'd assumed it was from one of her girlfriends, but now, it made me question everything. I didn't know what to do. I had an appointment set up for Monday to see if there was any chance the baby could be mine. If it was, and I'd accused her of cheating, I'd feel like the world's biggest fool. But she was coming home in a few hours, and I had no idea what to say to her. I was terrified of ruining what we had, but these doubts were gnawing at me, eating me alive. The hours leading up to Lisa's return home that evening were some of the longest and most agonizing of my life. I paced back and forth in our living room, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I was overjoyed at the thought of becoming a father. The idea of holding our baby in my arms, watching them take their first steps, and hearing their first words filled me with a warmth I couldn't describe. But on the other hand, the nagging doubts about how this could even be possible were tearing me apart. When I finally heard the sound of her key in the door, my heart leaped into my throat. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself as she walked in, a big smile on her face. She was clearly excited about the pregnancy, and it broke my heart a little to see that innocent joy, knowing what was going through my mind. "Hey," she said, coming over to give me a hug. I hugged her back, but I could feel my body tense up. She must have sensed something was off because she pulled back and looked at me, her eyebrows furrowed in concern. "Is everything okay?" she asked. I hesitated for a moment, not sure how to start, but I knew I couldn't keep this bottled up any longer. "Lisa," I began, my voice a bit shaky. "I'm really happy about the baby, but I can't help but be confused. You know about my condition. How is this possible?" She looked at me, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it guilt? Fear? But then it was gone, and she smiled again, albeit a bit nervously. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe the doctors were wrong. Miracles happen, right?" I nodded, but I wasn't convinced. I decided to bring up the other things that had been bothering me. "Lisa, there's some other things too," I said. "Like the nights you've been coming home late from work, and that different perfume I smelled on you, and the winky face text I saw on your phone. I know it might sound crazy, but I can't help but wonder." Her face paled, and she took a step back. I could see the shock and hurt in her eyes, and part of me immediately regretted bringing it up like that. But it was too late now. "Are you accusing me of cheating?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed. "I don't know what to think, Lisa. I just need some answers." She sat down on the couch, her head in her hands. For a long moment, there was silence. Then she looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe you'd think that of me," she said. "I've never been unfaithful to you. Ever." She went on to explain that the late nights were just because of work. Her clients were demanding, and she had to wine and dine them to close deals. The different perfume was a sample she'd gotten at a department store and decided to try out. And the winky face text was from a female colleague who was just being silly. I listened to her explanations, and part of me wanted to believe her, but the doubts were still there. I told her about the appointment I had on Monday to see if the baby could be mine. "If it turns out the baby is mine, and I accuse you of cheating, I'll never forgive myself, I said. She nodded. I understand. But I wish you trusted me more. We sat there in silence for a while longer, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Eventually, she got up and said she needed some time alone. She went into our bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the couch, feeling like the worst person in the world. I hated that I had put her through this, but I also couldn't ignore my concerns. That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying our conversation over and over. In the morning, I got up early and decided to go for a run. I hoped the fresh air and exercise would clear my head. As I pounded the pavement, I thought about everything Lisa had said. Could I really be overreacting? But then I remembered the doctor's words, and the doubts came creeping back. When I got home, Lisa was already up. She looked like she hadn't slept much either. We didn't say much to each other as we went about our morning routines, but I could feel the tension in the air. It was like a thick fog that had settled between us, and I didn't know how to make it go away. The following day, the tension in our home was palpable. Lisa and I moved around each other like strangers, careful not to touch or make eye contact for too long. It was as if an invisible wall had been erected between us, and I had no idea how to break it down. I tried to bury myself in work, hoping the distraction would help me make sense of my jumbled thoughts. But as an IT consultant, focus was crucial, and my mind kept wandering back to Lisa and the pregnancy. I found myself staring blankly at my computer screen, replaying our conversation from the night before. Her tearful eyes, her desperate pleas of innocence, it all haunted me. Around noon, I received a text from Lisa. It was simple, just a few words. I love you. Let's talk later. But those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew she was trying to reach out, to mend the rift that had opened up between us, but I was still so conflicted. I replied with a thumbs up emoji, not trusting myself to type out anything more meaningful. I didn't want to give her false hope, but I also didn't want to push her away completely. That afternoon, I decided to do some research on my condition. I scoured medical journals, online forums, and anything else I could find related to azoospermia. What I discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. There were rare cases where men with similar blockages had somehow managed to father children. It was like a glimmer of hope, but it also made me question everything even more. If it was possible for me to be the father, then had I really been unfair to Lisa? As the day wore on, I became increasingly restless. I needed to talk to someone, but I didn't want to burden our friends or family with our problems just yet. So, I reached out to an old college buddy, someone I knew I could trust. I gave him a brief rundown of the situation, leaving out some of the more personal details. His response was surprisingly blunt. You need to trust your wife, he said. If she says she's never cheated, you have to believe her. Otherwise, you're going to ruin your relationship. But it wasn't that easy. I had been cheated on before, in a previous relationship. It had been a messy, painful experience that had left me scarred. I thought I had healed, that Lisa had helped me move on, but now those old wounds were reopening. That evening, when Lisa came home from work, the air was thick with anticipation. We both knew we needed to have a more in-depth conversation. She walked in, looking exhausted, and set her bag down on the table. Hey, she said softly. Hey, I replied, getting up from the couch. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, before she broke the silence. I know you're still worried, she said, and I understand, but I really need you to trust me. This baby is ours, and we should be happy. I nodded. I want to be happy, Lisa, but I can't just turn off my doubts. You have to understand where I'm coming from. She sighed. I do, but you have to give me a chance. Let's go to the doctor's appointment on Monday together, and we'll find out the truth. I agreed. It was the least I could do. But deep down, I was still terrified of what we might find out. That night, as we lay in bed, the distance between us felt wider than ever. We both stared at the ceiling, lost in our own thoughts. I reached out and took her hand, and she squeezed it gently. It was a small gesture, but it gave me a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could get through this. The weekend passed in a haze of unease. Lisa and I went through the motions of our daily lives, but the underlying tension never dissipated. We made small talk over breakfast, avoided eye contact during meals, and slept with a chasm of space between us and our bed. It was as if we were both holding our breath, waiting for Monday and the doctor's appointment that loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. On Sunday afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to clear my head, so I went for a long drive. The open road stretched out before me, but my thoughts were firmly anchored to Lisa and the impending uncertainty. As I drove, I replayed every moment of our relationship in my mind, searching for clues, for any sign that might confirm or dispel my fears. I remembered our first date, how nervous we both were. We'd gone to a small Italian restaurant, and I'd spilled wine on my shirt. Lisa had laughed, a genuine, carefree laugh that had immediately put me at ease. And then there were the countless soccer games we'd played together, the way she'd cheer me on from the sidelines, her voice ringing out above the others. These memories were like precious gems, but now they seemed tarnished by the doubts that had crept in. When I got back home, Lisa was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was a sadness there, a longing for things to go back to the way they were. "Where did you go?" she asked softly. "Just for a drive," I replied. Needed to think. She nodded and looked back at the TV. I sat down beside her, and we sat in silence for a while. Then, I took her hand. "Lisa," I said, "I'm really sorry for all of this. I know I'm making it hard on you, but I just can't help how I feel." She turned to me, tears glistening in her eyes. "I know," she said. "I just wish you could trust me. This baby is a gift, and I don't want to lose you because of something that might not even be true." I squeezed her hand. "I'm trying, Lisa. I really am." The next morning, we both got up early. The drive to the doctor's office was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. When we arrived, the waiting room was filled with expectant mothers and fathers, their faces a mix of excitement and nervousness. It made me ache for what we could have had, a normal pregnancy filled with joy and anticipation. We sat down, and Lisa fidgeted with her purse strap. I could tell she was just as nervous as I was. After what felt like an eternity, the nurse called our names. We followed her into the examination room, and the doctor entered shortly after. He was an older man, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. He greeted us and then got straight to the point. "So," he said, "let's see if we can figure out what's going on here." He asked Lisa a series of questions about her pregnancy symptoms and her medical history. Then, he turned to me. "And you," he said, "I understand you have azoospermia. Let's take a look at your recent tests." He studied my file for a moment, his brow furrowed. Then, he looked up at us. "Well," he said, "it's still a bit of a mystery. There are rare cases where men with your condition have fathered children, but it's not common. We'll need to do some more tests to be sure." Lisa and I exchanged a look. There was a glimmer of hope in her eyes, but I was still filled with dread. What if the test came back negative? What if I really wasn't the father? The doctor scheduled us for more tests and told us to come back in a few days. As we left the office, Lisa reached for my hand. "See," she said, "there's still a chance. We just have to be patient." I nodded, but inside, I was falling apart. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I knew I had to make a decision. I could either choose to trust Lisa completely and embrace the possibility of this baby being ours, or I could let my doubts consume me and risk losing everything we had built together. That night, sleep eluded me completely. I tossed and turned, my mind a battleground between trust and doubt. Images of Lisa and our life together flashed through my head, intertwined with the nagging questions that refused to be silenced. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the doctor's face, his words echoing in my ears, leaving me in a state of restless turmoil. In the early hours of the morning, as the first light of dawn peeked through the curtains, I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Lisa. I made my way to the kitchen and brewed a strong cup of coffee, hoping the caffeine would jolt my senses and bring some clarity. As I sat at the table, staring into the dark liquid, I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. I had to make a choice, and it had to be now. When Lisa finally woke up, she found me still sitting at the kitchen table, lost in thought. She walked over and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay?" I looked up at her and saw the concern in her eyes. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. "Lisa," I said, my voice steady, "I've decided to trust you completely. I don't want to let these doubts ruin what we have. This baby is ours, and we're going to face whatever comes together." Tears welled up in her eyes as she pulled me into a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise you, you won't regret this." Over the next few days, we waited anxiously for the results of the additional tests. The tension was still there, but it was different now. We were no longer on opposite sides. Instead, we were a united front, clinging to the hope that this baby was indeed a miracle for us. We spent our time talking about the future, about how we would decorate the nursery, what kind of parents we wanted to be. Lisa's excitement was infectious, and I found myself getting caught up in it, allowing the joy to slowly seep back into our lives. When the day of the results finally arrived, we held hands tightly as we walked into the doctor's office. The doctor greeted us with a warm smile and motioned for us to sit down. "I have good news," he said, looking directly at us. "The test came back positive. It's very rare, but it seems that you, sir, are indeed the father." Relief washed over us like a tidal wave. Lisa burst into tears of joy, and I pulled her close, my own eyes filling with tears. In that moment, all the doubts and fears that had plagued us seemed to vanish into thin air. In the weeks that followed, we dove headfirst into preparing for the baby's arrival. We painted the nursery a soft pastel blue, filled it with stuffed animals and baby books. Lisa's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and we attended every prenatal class together, learning about childbirth and parenting. Our relationship, which had been strained to the breaking point, was now stronger than ever. We had learned the hard way that trust was the foundation of everything we had built together, and we were determined not to take it for granted again. Looking back, I'm grateful for that difficult period. It had tested us in ways I could never have imagined, but it had also brought us closer, made us appreciate what we had. And now, as we awaited the arrival of our little bundle of joy, I knew that we were ready to face whatever the future held, as long as we had each other.